that we hold so dear at this wonderful time of the year.
What's up, guys? Welcome to today's episode of VLOGMAS. So if you don't know, I am a nutritionist for Black Iron Nutrition, and we actually have a podcast called Bin Radio. Kind of can talk about anything from nutrition, training, macros, intuitive eating. We cover all kinds of stuff on the podcast. But today, myself and fellow bin coach Nicole, we are going to be talking about some of the common myths in the nutrition world. Now, on my channel, I have done a video way in the past about the biggest dieting myths or why some diets don't work. So if you haven't seen some of those videos, I'll put them up in the link box there. And I'll also put in the description box a link to the Bin Radio as well as some other very popular nutrition videos that I've done on my channel. Today, we're kind of talking about some cool things, different things that I haven't actually discussed on my channel. So I figured this would be a great opportunity to make it a Vlogmas video. Number one, because a lot of my Vlogmases are a bit shorter in length, obviously because I'm trying to crank out so many videos per day. And this just kind of gives me an opportunity to sit and talk and let the video roll. Hi. And you guys can see what we're talking about. If you did not know there was a Bin Radio, now is your chance to, hi. Okay. You guys can just sit and listen along for this podcast if you maybe didn't know that Bin had a podcast. So without further ado, let's go ahead and check into this Zoom meeting and let's get the podcast started.
Hey. We'll count down and we'll get it going.
Ready?
3, 2, 1. Bin Radio in the building.
Yo.
First podcast of 2021. And this is probably going to be my favorite topic of 2021. Doing Mythbusters today. We got two lovely ladies with us today. My wife, Nicole.
What's up?
And Miss Manders, what's going on? I haven't been able to be on a pod with you yet.
I know. Actually, do you know what's funny? This is my first Bin podcast.
Yeah.
What?
I know. I've been here for so long and I've never done a podcast.
And I asked Manders and she just won't say no to me, so.
This is true.
Here we are.
I love it. Well,
Yeah.
it's cool to have you guys on. I think this is going to be a fun topic. I know both of you guys have a great social media presence, which brings a lot, not only to your followers, but to the company as well. And I know we have a lot of, we'll call them fibs, myths, whatever you want to call them today. We got a bunch of different topics that you guys are going to kind of crunch. And what's cool is a lot of those came from either your clients or your followers and people like that. So we kind of broke it down into a couple different categories today. We're going to start with carbs and just talk a little bit about that. I know that's a very popular topic. We're going to follow that up with accountability, and then also working out and fitness. So kind of workout related questions or myths. And then we're going to wrap it up with fasting and detoxing, as well as kind of results driven myths. So super excited to kind of do all of that inside of 1 hour. We'll see if we can do it.
Yeah, we can do that. I think we can do that. So why don't we go ahead and have you guys explain why if you eat carbs after dark, you will get fat.
I will kind of give us a little intro into this. I personally came up with this idea because I think Manders and I talk often, about things we experience with clients, and we kind of like help each other work through certain situations with clients. And I feel like we run into a lot of the same comments or questions from clients that are just not true, like just straight up myths. So carbs is, I think, a great place to start for us. Manners, I'm sure you get this a lot, even with clients that you've been working with for a while, like telling you I know I personally get like telling me they had a bad week because they ate too many carbs, or like carb specific questions like, I should have made a better decision and not finished my carbs before bed. Like I should have had them earlier in the day, or like something that I just kind of scratch my head at. Like, wait, I thought I taught you better than that,
Yes. Yeah, I think it comes a lot from just the diet culture in general. Like we went through an era of time where everything was low fat. Like we went through two phases in the diet era. The first, I think the fat one came first, and everything was marketed as low fat, this and everything was low fat because there was a time where people believed that the less fat that you ate, the less fat that you would have. And so if you cut out fat, then you would lose fat. And then it kind of shifted over to sugar, and everything was low carb this, low carb sugar, low sugar or net carbs or whatever. And it kind of started to create a fear of carbs in general. And that's really how the diet industry works, is it's fear-based. They present to you a problem and they make you fearful, obviously, which for most people who are in the diet industry, their fear is gaining weight or gaining fat. So they present to you this fear and their thing can fix it. So this low carb diet, this low fat diet or whatever it is. And I think that whole mentality of being afraid of carbs is what sparked like, oh, if I eat too many carbs, I'm going to gain fat. Or if I eat too much fat, I'm going to gain fat. And it's just, I think that would be where it starts.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is like you're talking on diet culture and like that all makes sense, but often even we see it, right, come from like performance culture, because like the CrossFit world was so obsessed with paleo for so long. And that's kind of like, I initially got in touch with Chrissy because I had just on a whim wrote this article called How Donuts Gave Me Abs.
I remember that.
Yeah, and it was like years ago. Like it was in 2013.
Yes.
And it basically talked kind of about what you just said about how like, you know, we've been living in this culture now, especially with paleo and stuff, where like we were meant to believe that carbs is why we weren't achieving, you know, aesthetic results. And like, I was here in this article to prove you wrong, right? Because it was like such a new concept at that time. And it's just crazy to me to think that like, you know, this whole group of people that are centered around performance and gaining muscle and gaining strength are like also just so ingrained or just have ingrained in their mind that like carbs are going to hurt them. Right? And in reality, it's like completely the opposite.
Or it's like the certain type of carb, like the paleo. I think that from the performance side of things is where, at least in my clients, I see it the most. Like they'll be like, oh, well, I had a really bad week because I ate mostly processed carbs and didn't get my carbs from sweet potatoes or rice or whatever. And they're more focused on like what type of carbs, because they have this, you know, thing that like certain types of carbs give you an aesthetic look, like you were saying, versus like donuts or, you know, like that.
So when I worked in the supplement industry, a lot of people always asked about, once again, kind of on that topic, the specific carb. So is it sugar or is it dextrose or is it, you know, fillers? So like stevia, things like that. What are your guys' thoughts with like that kind? So like, is real sugar better than quote unquote fake sugar and like all that kind of stuff?
You want to talk about that first?
I'll
I just blabbed my ear off.
I guess if a client would come to me and ask me that, I actually just came across this today with a client. She messaged me and asked me for a macro-friendly suggestion for hot chocolate. And I kind of responded with like, hey, hot chocolate is like a sugary treat. So like, I mean, I guess you can use almond milk, you know, if you don't really want dairy. But like, if you're going to use those, you know, Swiss Miss packs that we all love as chocolate milk, like it's about 30 grams of carbs. Like it's about similar as a dessert, and just have it and kind of like, that's it, you know? Messaged me back and she said something about she had saw like reduced calorie or sugar-free Swiss Miss packs. And so I looked up the ingredients, and it was all obviously made with sucralose, which is going to drop the carb content from, you know, 30 grams of a pack to like 5, I think it was. And
so how does that work?
Because it's a sugar substitute. So it's not an actual carbohydrate. It's a chemically sweetened substance to kind of taste like sugar.
Cool.
I think it tastes horrible, for the record.
Right. And that's kind of my response. I was like, look, this probably isn't going to taste like the hot chocolate that you want. So that was my first thing. And the other thing is like, I don't know, I would rather you take 30 grams of carbs from a true hot chocolate pack than take a pack of sucralose.
I'm kind of with you on that,
Yeah, go ahead with that.
No, I was just going to piggyback off what you said. I agree. However, I try to stay away from like the general terms of like, oh, sucralose or Splenda or stevia is bad, you know, because
100%.
it's really hard, like in what context, you know, like bad for me means because it's going to upset my stomach. Like I just don't really digest that so well. So like, yes, to me it might be bad, but like, is it inherently going to cause people to gain fat? No. But then you go on to the path of like, okay, well, are you saying it's bad because of the chemicals that you're putting in your body? Now we're just like going down all these different like rabbit holes and how you want to label something good or bad. And it's just like, I would rather just avoid that in general, you know?
These are just the differences in the facts between the two of them.
Exactly.
It's not a valid. Yeah, it's not a valid judgment.
Right.
And I can tell you from working in the supplement industry, all those people that were like, oh, I want the cleanest, most pure form of protein. I'm like, no, you do not. Like, it will taste absolutely awful.
Right.
Like, there has to be some kind of flavoring, some kind of sweetening, all that, or you will not be able to stomach just like a powdered protein.
Right. Or like where people say like, oh, processed. Okay, but like literally almost every single thing you put in your mouth is processed to a certain extent, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's
I mean,
hard.
that's just proof of the success of marketing.
Yeah,
To where,
exactly.
You know, where like it, you know, oh, if something has like keeps its chemical name and it hasn't been labeled something as a marketing term, there's that perception that it's somehow bad because, oh my God, it sounds like a chemical. It's so you can't put chemicals in your body.
And it's like, what? Did you step outside today? Did you breathe the air? Yeah, exactly.
And I like
Did
that
you lay on
guys,
your sheets? Did you wash your sheets?
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Did you brush your
Exactly.
teeth?
Yeah.
exactly. I like that you guys touched on sort of the performance basis of that because I think CrossFit's finally grown out of that.
Yeah.
That low carb paleo phase that was so pervasive.
Yes.
And then like Rich Froning came around and like people were, I remember it being for a brief moment, I think it was like after he won his first games, it was like a total scandal because they asked him what he eats and he's like, I eat like a shit ton of oatmeal. And people were like, oh my God, but like carbs are bad for you.
Wasn't he drinking like a gallon of milk a day or something crazy too?
And like Gatorades and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like old school strength and nutrition or strength and conditioning nutrition. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that whole thing, like, there was, I don't want to name drop him because I actually like him on a personal level, but I'll leave it out. Rob Wolf was a big proponent of the low carb stuff.
Yeah.
And then that kind of coincided with Gary Taubes coming out with Good Calories, Bad Calories, which was a New York Times bestseller, which was like, oh my God, you can't eat carbs and like bread will kill you.
These specific carbs, like Mander was saying.
Yeah.
That was
wild.
We should like follow that up with like I'm sure you've had this experience too, but like I have had experience with clients like with a more paleo approach.
Yes.
Right. Or like a lower carb approach.
Yeah.
But that's the minority.
It is.
And it's not the performance world. It's not most of the people or clients we see. It's typically people like who had a very poor or like very, I should just say poor understanding of nutrition in general. Like most of their diet's like fast food or packaged food or whatnot.
Yep.
And they're sedentary.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
How many people do you have coming to you wanting to try out keto?
You can start there.
Manders.
Okay. So I think actually less now than in the past.
Agreed.
Because I've been so vocal about why I don't like general diets for an individual person. Like I've made videos on this. I've talked about this so many times on Instagram because like keto was developed actually, if I remember correctly, for children with seizures, was it not?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And so like it has a great purpose for the purpose.
And when children are like, when it was first introduced like that, it was actually only done under medical supervision in a hospital. Like they would never tell you like, go home and do this diet plan because they weren't actually sure how your body would react. And so.
And they were doing blood work like all the time too, right?
Monitor, exactly. And that's one of those things where I think that the diet industry capitalized on that because then they turned it into a fear thing and then they sold keto everything. Like now we have keto bars, keto chocolate, it's like, and there's literally no just because you eat something keto doesn't, like, you're not going to lose any.
Basically, all that packaging means is that it's incredibly high in fat and incredibly low in carbs. Like the caloric content of it is almost worse.
Honestly, some of the keto things I've seen have been worse, you know, for lack of better
as
term.
far as like higher calories.
Yeah.
Say worse. Like, yeah, it's a higher calorie item compared to something that's not labeled keto.
Right. So I think it comes from a lack of understanding, like you were saying, Nicole, of like nutrition in general, because when they're looking at keto, they're not thinking any type of macronutrients. It's like keto's over here and like calories are over there, but it's actually, you really need to understand both of them to understand why, you know, keto is keto essentially. And so I think once I started talking about that, I started getting a lot less people wanting to do it. Yeah. But I've actually had an increase in people who are coming off of keto wanting to now get back into like this normal way of eating, because let's be honest, you can't, well, maybe you could, the very small percentage of people, but for the general population, you can't eat keto until you're 70 years old. Like, it's really unrealistic.
It's just unfulfilling.
Sure.
I think for most people, and it's hard. And unfortunately, a lot of the people, I'm sure you have a similar experience, like a guy that I've been working with probably about 5 or 6 months now. So this is our first like big holiday season together. Mm-hmm. And it's the first season in like 2 years. I think he said that like the previous 2 years he's been keto. So he's been showing up to like Thanksgiving or Christmas or all these things and like has been doing keto. And he's one of those guys that like does something to the T. He was very overweight before keto and lost, 50, 60 pounds, whatever it was. So he like almost trusted that with his life,
Yeah.
And then kind of like what you were saying, Manders, he realized that it wasn't going to be sustainable and he like wasn't happy, and
yeah.
I like to I coined the term like keto rehab. So when I take people like out of keto and transition them into like a normal balance, I like to call that keto rehab. And we have been doing that. And he was just like, losing weight along the way still, slowly, but just feeling better, right? Because we see that all the time.
Yeah.
They get carbs back in their life. Their brain has energy again. Like,
right.
Body functions as it should.
Yeah.
And he was just like, the messages from Thanksgiving were just like the most gratifying messages I could have ever got from a client, because it was just all about like, oh my gosh, I was able to eat stuffing. And I understood that like only a quarter of my plate needed to be stuffing, and that was fine. And, just like, normal, I don't know, like normal eating.
And normal way to navigate your life, like after maybe weight loss. Because I think you're right, people get into that mentality of like keto or nothing, and then they lose a bunch of weight. But what they don't realize, and this is kind of what I talked about in that keto, or like why not all diets work for people, is because if they didn't have any information about macronutrients before and they were eating, let's say, I'm just going to throw out a random number, 3,000 calories a day, then they go to keto and they're now eating 2,300 calories a day. They're going to lose weight, but they're putting all of that into the keto. Like, they're like, oh, keto made me lose weight. So now that's what they believe and what they hold on to. So they can't really like fully comprehend how letting go of the keto, but then just changing the ratio of carbs to fats while still being in a deficit yields basically the same results.
So last question on the carbs. Carb cycling, more helpful for weight loss than counting macros?
I'm gonna say no on that one, but with like a side note, because I think for some people it can be really beneficial for weight loss if it's more rewarding for them to have like, I don't want to say cheat day, but like a higher carb day. Because what can happen with your week of carb cycling is you can have your, 3 low carb days. And if that makes them be able to adhere to those low carb days, knowing that they have a high carb day following, then it's fantastic. Because then let's say their average is still 1,700 calories, it wouldn't have really mattered if they had 3 low carb days, 1 high carb day, or all 4 moderate. If it averages out to be the same, it averages out to be the same no matter what. I think it comes down to more of like a specific client personality type, and if they prefer to like switch up their meals, basically. Like if they're okay with eating lower carb, if it means that the next day they can have almost double the amount of carbs, I
had posted something about, how low carb negatively affects female hormone health, and like basically, just said, ladies, if this sounds like you should be asking questions.
Yeah.
And so a girl messaged me and said, I'm carb cycling, so would this breakdown fit into the category you're talking about? And it was like, you know, kind of like what you were saying, Mander's like maybe 1 or 2 high carb days and then like 3 low carb days. But the low carb days were like 70 grams of carbs a day.
Oh, wow.
Like 3. Yeah. And so, you know, I did the math, right? So I like took them all, I averaged it, divided by whatever 4 it was, the days she gave me. And I said to her, I'm like, look, your carb average is still only 140 grams a day, you know, if we average this out. And so like, that's what I think more people have to pay attention to is like, kind of like what you were saying, high and low is good, but we still have to make sure that we're getting like adequate amount.
Yep.
Overall
is the averages. People forget that the averages are what is really most important, which is also why, okay, we're coming up. Also why if you can have somebody who is, you know, moderately, let's say they're not carb cycling, they're just eating a moderate amount of carbs, but then let's say Saturday and Sunday, they go banana sandwich and eat double, triple the amount of carbs, that will throw off their entire weekly average. And so for that person who maybe like is trying to lose weight and then they're like, oh, you know, I don't know why I'm not losing weight, I'm eating low carb. Well, those other 2 days that are significantly higher carb, that's throwing off their entire average as well, which is not going to be able to allow them to lose the weight. So I cut this video because I didn't want to give away the entire podcast. So if you want to hear the remainder, the full episode of the podcast, I will put the link in the description box, and I believe it will be up within the next couple of weeks. So if you liked what you heard in this and you want to hear the rest, make sure to click that link so you can get the update on when it goes live. And that is all that I have for you in today's episode of Vlogmas. I hope you enjoyed. Don't forget, as always, to give it a thumbs up if you enjoy the Vlogmas style videos, and so you don't miss any Mondays or Thursdays, actually every day, because it's Vlogmas with Manders. Okay, I'm gonna go eat my dinner now. I'll see you guys in the next one.